So this is the second part of the D-Ring tutorial. In the first part we looked at how to create the main body here using the sweep feature and a few other features, and in this part we're going to look at how you create the pin. So if we just open the pin in its own window and then look at the feature tree here, you can see that the initial feature is a lofted feature. If I highlight that in the feature tree and then just zoom in a little bit, you can see that this flattened section on the end of the pin that's meant to be gripped by the person operating the D-Ring is actually a lofted feature. So we're going to try and recreate that in a new part if you want to follow along as I do it. So we're going to go File, New, double click on New Part, come into the new part, and as before, if you can't see your planes, you need to look at the visibilities drop down menu here just to check that they're turned on, and just check that they're all visible over in your feature tree so you can hide and show them over there. So that's fine. So the first thing that we're going to do, if we just quickly go back to the pin, we're going to create this circular sketch on this plane here. So it's on the right plane and it's a 6mm circular sketch. So let's recreate that. Let's pick the right plane, let's go sketch, pick the circle tool, lock it to the origin, drag the circle out slightly, and if I remember correctly this was a 6mm shaft on this pin, so we'll just put 6mm in there. So that's our starting point of the loft. So the next thing that we need for the loft is the shape of the next profile that we want to loft to. But before we do that, we need to put a new plane in here which is offset from that plane that we've just used, so the right hand plane, so that we can sketch our next profile a distance away from this profile. So we're going to put a new plane in. So we're going to click Reference Geometry, Plane, and then as our first reference, which is what the plane tool is asking for over here, first reference, we're going to pick the right hand plane, and you can see it automatically puts the right hand plane in that first box and then gives me the option of offsetting by a distance away from there, and I think the distance that we're going to have is 9mm. So you can see when I put 9mm in there, my new plane preview jumped away from the right plane by 9mm. So I'm going to OK that. Just to make it a little bit less confusing in the graphics window here, I'm going to size this plane down slightly. So these planes in actual fact are infinite, they go off in into infinity at all corners, but in the graphics window they're represented as having a boundary, and what you can do as the user, you can edit where that boundary is. So you can see I just grabbed one of these spheres at the corner of the plane, and I can drag the plane to make it smaller or make it appear smaller or appear larger. So I'm going to size it down so it's nearer the size of our sketch. So there you go. Just makes any new planes that you put in the graphics window a little bit neater and a little bit easier to see when you've got the base planes visible as well. So I'm now going to sketch on this new plane. So I'm going to click on the plane, click sketch, and then I'm going to sketch this slot shape here. So there's a few different versions of the slot. You want to select the center point, which allows you to pick the center of the slot first. So we're going to lock that to the origin or the center of the circle, drag out to the side, and this is defining how wide the slot is, but you can see because that initial click was the center point, as I drag one way, the other side of the slot grows in the other direction. So we're going to lock it to the horizontal, so we'll click, and then the third input when I'm just creating the geometry is the thickness of the slot. So you can see here I'm varying the thickness, so we're just going to drop that there. and then we're going to put some dimensions on that. I think we'll put a thickness dimension on, which will be slightly less than the circle, because we want it to appear that this has been started off as the circular shaft and then been squashed. So we'll maybe put 4mm on there, and then we'll dimension the width of this slot shape as well. So we'll drag that in so it's a little bit above the width of the circle, maybe 9.5. We may come back in and change that, but for the time being we're happy. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put a third sketch in here. So the loft is going to start off at this circular shape, it's going to transition to this racetrack shape that we created here in this sketch, and then it's going to terminate at a single point on another plane that we're about to create. So if we go reference geometry, new plane, and this time we're not going to use the right plane, the base plane here, as our reference. We're going to use this plane that we created to put this slot on as our reference. So if we pick that, it's still got the same offset in there that we used last time. We're happy with that. A 9mm offset is fine, and you can see that it's created a new plane, and not only that, it's sized this plane to the same extents that we sized this plane down to, so that's quite useful. So we're just going to sketch on this new plane now, and all we're going to put in this sketch is a single point. So we pick the point tool, lock that point to the origin, and then we're happy with that sketch. So if I hide the planes now, so I'll go up here and hide base planes and hide all other planes as well, you can see that we've got these three sketches, and this is going to be the basis of our lofted feature. So if we pick lofted boss base up here, and what it's asking to create the loft, what it's asking us to put in this first box is some profile shapes. So we've created our profile shapes, so we'll just click through them one by one. We want to start at the circular profile, move on to this profile. You can see it's given me a preview already, and then we want to terminate at this point sketch. And then if we just have a quick look at what we've got there, you can see it's getting close to what we require, sort of a squashed shape that started off as a circular shaft but's being squashed in the vertical here, but it's terminating quite abruptly here. It's got quite a pointy end to it, and the reason that is what this loft is trying to do is it's trying to transition from the first profile to the second profile to the end profile as quickly as possible. So what that means is when it reaches the end profile, it inscribes a straight line, or virtually a straight line. So you can see here it's coming from this slot shape profile down to a point as quickly as possible. It wants to get to that point as quickly as possible, and that's not ideal for the shape that we're trying to create. We'd like a more rounded end to this shape. So the way that we do that is we play around with how much influence the planes that these sketches are on. So you can see two of the planes there. You can see the plane that the point's on, how much influence that plane has on the shape. And because this point was the last sketch that we picked, it's the end of the loft. So we're going to change the end constraint here. It's on default at the moment. We're going to change it to normal to profile. So you could read that as normal to the plane that the final sketch has been sketched on. And as we know, normal to means at 90 degrees. So what that means is this end plane is having an influence on how this loft transitions to that final point. And as you can see, if I switch it back off there, change it back to default, we get the pointy transition, whereas if I switch it back on, it becomes more rounded. And I can even vary the amount of influence that that endpoint plane has. by changing this number in this box here. So the end tangent length, if I turn that up now, you can see it's transitioning to that final point more smoothly, and it's inscribing a curve, whereas before it was very straight at the final point here. We'll switch it back on. You can see it's almost a straight line there, whereas if we switch the normal to profile on, it's a nice gradual curve. So you may just want to play with that a little bit, make it become a little bit more rounded, and then I think we're happy with that lofted shape. So the other end of this pin is just a simple extrude. So if we look at the one that we already have, it's a circular extrude, and it's 38mm long. So if we want to create that now, you can see that the sketches that I used for the loft have now disappeared, and that's not because I've hidden them. It's because when you use a sketch to create a feature, by default SolidWorks lets the feature absorb the sketches. So I'm showing that here in the feature tree. That loft now contains some sub items, and those items are the sketches that created the loft. And more than that, it hides them in the feature tree. So if I want to make them visible again, I can click on any one of them and just click on the show icon, the eye icon here. You can see that that sketch is now visible. It's in a grey colour, so it's a little bit tricky to see, but it is there. And what that means is, if I make the circular sketch visible again, I can then use that sketch to create my extrude. So the loft and the extrude will be sharing a single sketch, which is a good thing, because it means if I wanted to change the starting shape of the loft, or the starting size from 6mm to something else, then the extrude would also update. So it's quite an efficient way of doing it, rather than creating another sketch. So if I just select the sketch that I want, click on the extrude feature, and you can see there it's giving me a preview of what it's trying to do. It's actually picked the wrong direction to send the extrude, so I want to change that over here. There you go, we're going in the right direction, and if I remember rightly, it was 38mm long. So there we go. So if we just quickly hide everything again, the only thing that possibly needs addressing with this now is that we're seeing a harsh transition. If I turn all the edges of this model off, there's a little bit of a harsh transition between this lofted portion and the shaft there, but we can easily remedy that by, if we go back into the loft feature, so over here, if we go edit feature, we put a constraint on the end of this loft. We want to put a similar thing on the start of the loft. So if we go normal to profile, and you can see when I clicked on that there, that the preview updates, and what that's doing is it's making the initial start of the loft a little bit smoother as well, rather than exiting this first sketch using just a straight line. It's allowed the plane that sketch is on to influence the shape and the transition. What I'm going to do is back that off slightly so you can see what effect that's having as I vary that figure. And what this is going to allow this loft to do is run into that extrude feature a little bit more smooth at the transition. So there you go, the transition's a little smoother now. So we'll put the edges back on in the display menu up here, and then I think the final feature was just a chamfer feature on the end of this. So if we just select that edge on the end, click on chamfer, and it gives us our preview of the chamfer feature. 0.5 is okay for this, and there you go, that's the pin feature finished.